This is the Pajaro Valley, an abundant source of flowers, fruits, and vegetables, which are worth over $1.5 billion per year. Normally in the spring, these fields are a brilliant mixture of red and green, with the harvesting of the strawberry crop that brings in $132 million. But a lot of this year's crop was buried in a sea of mud, the result of severe flooding that affected farms, businesses, and lives. The damage impacted the entire Pajaro Valley. But the town of Pajaro took the brunt of the floodwater when the levee broke in 8 places, 7 of which were on the south side of the Pajaro River. This is prime farmland, dependent on hand labor. And that labor comes largely from Mexican-American immigrants who make up the bulk of the population. What happened to cause such devastation? Meteorologist Jim Vanderzwaan was tracking the Pacific storm system that rolled in with a vengeance on Friday, March 10, 1995.
One of the great marvels with weather forecasting are the tools we use to try to predict what Mother Nature is going to do. Satellite imagery, radar, surface and upper air observations all give us a little bit of a feel for what's really going on. But you've got to kind of go back to the fundamentals once in a while on what's called the hydrological cycle. We figure on evaporation of water vapor in the atmosphere that gets moved downstream by the winds. Condensation is the next step in the cycle that allows clouds to be formed, and then of course precipitation is what ultimately falls back to Earth that replenishes our water supply and makes it possible to live on the planet. Well, the one element that Mother Nature left out of that equation is distribution. As a result, we don't always get the same amount of rain every year as we would like. California, of course, has experienced floods before, but we are most recent in our memory with drought years. 5 years, to be exact, of below normal rainfalls every winter. So we simply were not accustomed to the fact that there could possibly be an awful lot of rain. And up until December '94, there wasn't a whole lot, but January, of course, the faucet opened and we saw an awful lot of rain in California. Then it quieted down for a little while in February, and then March it picked up again. Well, combine that with the fact that what happens is when you have 5 drought years, you've got some pretty thirsty soil. All the rain that falls gets absorbed. And that's what was the case in January. Although in the Carmel Valley, of course, we had too much rain too fast, and that still caused the river to go over the banks. But after all the rain, much like when Mom and Dad told you to save your pennies because they'll add up to a lot of dollars, same thing happened in nature. More and more rain continued to pile up to the point that the soil could no longer hold it. Then it simply runs off, taking the path of least resistance, which ultimately ends up being the nearest river. And as a result, it starts to fill up rather quickly. Now, we have another complicated situation in that people were not really feeling like they could be threatened by floodwaters after 5 years of drought. It's a little tough to convince folks that when we say a flood watch is in effect or a flood warning is in effect, that you better take it seriously. The National Weather Service, in combination with the emergency services people in Santa Cruz and Monterey County, are monitoring river gauges and remote rainfall gauges up in the mountains. That's typically where we get the heaviest rain because the moisture is lifted up by the mountain range and that really gets things spinning. So while it might be just a few showers over the valleys, it could be raining quite heavily over the mountains. And that's ultimately what led to the demise of the Pajaro River. Much like if you were to stand on top of a sloped driveway with a bucket of water or a hose and you let a little trickle of that water spill onto the driveway, you could actually watch that water slowly make its way down the driveway into the gutter. It's going to take it a little while. Well, on a much larger scale, that's what we're dealing with in nature. Heavy rains over the mountains will take a while to work their way down into the river and then ultimately downstream toward the ocean. And that's probably what fooled more people than anything else. Still in all, with the use of some of this technology, we were able to get a pretty good handle on the cumulative effect of the rain as well as the big storm that came in at that point in March, and the flood warnings eventually went out after flood watches were first posted. Still, some folks weren't quite convinced that it could happen to them. Heavy rains that started on Friday continued to cause the river to go up from about 20 feet early in the morning to over 33 feet by midnight Friday night, and that's where the problem started, and the flood came. And with all that water and all that weight and the potential for power to erode the levees, it broke a few of those, which complicated the matter even more. So it's one of those phenomena of nature that just about everybody in every part of the world has to go through some time or another. Perhaps the best thing to do is to heed the warnings. You can't fool Mother Nature.
As the rain fell harder and the water rose higher, evacuations began in the southern part of Watsonville.
Right here. Oh, push it. Okay, how you doing? What we need to do is we need to get you evacuated because of the we need to get you to leave because of the water's coming. You're gonna need like an ambulance or something to help you transport. The water's coming. The water's rising. It's getting ready to crest. We're evacuating all of downtown Watsonville.
Watsonville Police and Fire. How may I help you?
Is there an evacuation going on?
Yes, there is an evacuation currently in progress, and somebody will be coming to your door shortly. What you can do at this time is pack up some suitcases for your family, put your valuables inside, and when somebody does come to your door to evacuate you, you'll be ready to go.
Okay.
Okay?
But then, the levee broke on the south side of the river, sending torrents of water into the town of Pajaro.
You got a lot of people. I'm not sure. We really need to contact the people at Station 3 to find that out.
It was clear that people could no longer stay in their homes. Monterey County Sheriff's deputies, North County firefighters, and the city of Watsonville all moved in to help. Fire engines became lifeboats, carrying bewildered people and pets to safety.
Right here, full distance.
Overhead streetlights created an eerie scene as dozens of empty blue barrels floated through the flooded streets.
Behind the house where you picked up, or 5231, picked up all the people. Did you see which house that was? Yeah, I know where 31.
Anytime you have rivers and a valley, there's a potential for flooding. This isn't the first time the Pajaro Valley has been inundated. In 1955, a levee break to the north sent high water rushing into the city of Watsonville. The intensity of this latest storm was unexpected, but the city of Watsonville was far from unprepared.
That the water level has dropped a little bit. I believe now it's at 32.4 feet, and if it gets down to about 28 feet, then we will allow people to go back to their homes.
Most people don't realize the scope of this disaster as it applies to Monterey County. This wasn't just the Pajaro River flood. Monterey County had 4 or 5 of these Pajaro rivers all over their county. So when Pajaro went underwater, they were already trying to manage disasters in Carmel Valley, the Salinas River, and a number of other communities. Watsonville, being a good neighbor and being an allied law enforcement agency to Monterey County, it was only natural for us to jump in. We were already prepared, we were already in the disaster mode, and we were more than willing and able to help our neighbors.
We're currently treating for hypothermia. We have stripped his clothes, and we've got 2 people.
Toma la ropa y espera cerca el edificio allá. Let's get the people in here into the van. Por favor, entren adelante, por favor.
The full extent of the damage was most apparent the next morning. As the sun shone through a blue sky, it was clear the flooding was much worse than anyone imagined.
I've got 2 crews coming in. There'll be probably about 6 or 7 guys coming in this study. Yeah, we're gonna do a lot of preliminary work before we want to go.
Highway 1 was shut down in several spots, both north and south of the Pajaro Valley, making it impossible to get to some spots by road. Aerial views also solve the mystery of the blue barrels. As many as 5,000 empty barrels corralled at the Smucker's plant had simply floated away, winding up literally everywhere. They were a major nuisance, but fortunately not a danger. But the river itself proved treacherous. This man was one of 2 persons to die as a result of the flooding. He apparently fell into the water from the Watsonville side and was swept downstream, despite frantic efforts to rescue him.
Look for a flotation device, somebody. Okay. Hey, calma, 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 muy calma. Mira, mira. Allí. Derecho, derecho. Got one in the water, going down the middle of Pajaro River. Sucked in the current. He's in the current, you guys, right in the middle.
Have fire go to the trestle. Have him go to the trestle.
Tell him to get a flotation device out and throw it to him. The trestle.
You have him up on the bridge? Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound right. Might be west.
Missed him. God damn it. Missed him.
When any disaster strikes, there are stories of suffering, survival, and recovery. And the Pajaro Valley flood was no different. Here are some of those stories as recorded by the TV news reporters who came into our homes in March of 1995.
There's a very eerie feeling here. Pajaro is like a ghost town this morning. Much of it is still 3 to 4 feet underwater. They're still keeping people out of this area, but some have been able to sneak in and salvage some of their belongings. But health officials say this water is highly contaminated, and that's the reason why they're keeping people away. This lone man carrying a few belongings doesn't understand. He says there's very little water in his home, and he wants to stay. But most are still waiting to see how their homes and businesses fared. And for now, all they can do is wait, wonder, and pray.
Crews are pumping water out of Pajaro Middle School, but their efforts are just a drop in the bucket.
These floors are going to have to go, obviously.
Floodwaters buckled the hardwood floor of this gymnasium. What's more, 17 out of 22 classrooms are mired in mud. This is the library. Fortunately, all the books are okay because they were above the water line, but there is a lot of damage in this room right here. This is a swimming pool, but it used to be the reading area. It will take at least a month of mop-up before the school can open again.
This is our office area, and you can see the sludge and the mud. But the nice thing is that our computer systems are still operable, and so all our records have been saved.
Principal Deborah Kosaka says bad as all this is, things may get even worse. The school may lose some students, children of farm laborers who are now washed out of work.
We are anticipating that we'll have a drop in enrollment. We are concerned about the economics for our families. This is already a rather impoverished economic community, and it's unfortunate that these kinds of crises hit an area such as this.
The school has seen its share of problems. It belongs to a district that only now is emerging from bankruptcy. No one knows how far back this flood will set the school financially. For now, it's one step at a time. In Pajaro, Diane Garazzi, KNTV News.
So sorry for the peak. Some of my friends that live on the other side of Pajaro.
Why bad?
Yeah, it's really deep over there.
So we went looking and caught up with Isaac Beltran and his neighbor. What do you think you're going to see when you go back?
I don't know.
You don't know? After wading through several inches of water and just as much mud, the Beltrans feared and found the worst. Wall-to-wall mud, several inches deep, covering their floors. How are you doing?
No, not so good. I'm not happy.
Where do you start? Where do you begin? Clean.
I don't know.
Our next-door neighbor was already busy reclaiming his home, but many are still in shock here as they walk out with a few belongings and leaving the rest for another day.
This section of Main Street is still 3 or 4 feet underwater, and it's become kind of a graveyard of cars washed here by the floods. Some have been able to get in here this morning and salvage their cars, get them running and get them out of here. Others haven't been so lucky. But aside from the mess that greets residents this morning, there's a funny smell that hangs over Pajaro today.
Contaminated water is still a primary concern here. Basic services are still out. Most homes are without power, gas, and water, and will be for several more days.
Did you guys go through the earthquake too?
Yeah.
Is this worse or better?
Well, this is worse.
This is worse. Why?
In the earthquake, nothing happened to the house.
From one disaster to the next, many here take comfort in knowing they too will recover from the floods of '95.
There's nothing else we can do, Just keep going,
When the Pajaro River overflowed its banks, Ho Choi says his grocery store never stood a chance. A tidal wave of mud took out his front windows. That same mud has now wiped out 80% of his merchandise.
I'm so very, very sorry for my the customer because I cannot service for the fresh milk, fresh produce, and the fresh bread. They need right now, but I cannot do.
The Choi's guess it will be several weeks before power is restored, at least a month before their business is back on track. Down the street at Sanchez Liquors, the Sanchez family is also on cleanup patrol.
Just cleaning up with the mud and all the guff and trying not to be depressed because of all the damage that's been done. Because they just spent a week renovating right before the flood happened, so they're kind of upset about that.
Power is now restored to 2/3 of Pajaro, but clean water is still scarce. Some here say it will be weeks before Pajaro looks like a town again.
Tana Castro, KNTV News.
A good part of the recovery and cleanup was organized by the Watsonville Volunteer Center. During 3 consecutive weekends, hundreds of people rolled up their sleeves and pulled on their high-top boots, showing that individual effort can make a difference.
Right side, you'll see it. The mud begins right on the street and goes in. It's just covered with mud.
Today, people from all over answered the call to help clean up what the Pajaro flood had left behind.
Well, there's just obviously a mess that needs to be cleaned up, so I thought, what the heck, I have the day off.
For the flood victims, the size of the job is overwhelming. The moldy stench hangs heavy in the air. But side by side, volunteers help them tackle the challenge, one wheelbarrow full at a time.
Cleaning up after a flood is no easy task. Mud has seeped into the homes here, covering almost everything that was inside.
Each one of the groups takes a house and try to clear up, at least for the guys, clear up the mud and get it all out of the way. And the girls, they go inside the houses and try to take the carpets out and clean the floors and try to put it, you know, make it look nice and cleaner for the people that live in there.
Few are lucky. Miraculously, some of their things are still clean. But volunteers help other residents empty their entire houses, full of possessions that cannot be saved.
And if you sit in an office all day, this is not what you're accustomed to, but people are very generous and they'll come out any house. And they come with their shovels and their brooms and their rubber boots and they go to work.
Even some former 49ers pitched in after seeing all of the destruction on TV.
It's just based in human nature. When you see somebody who needs the help, you want to put your hands out there and help them.
And that help is gladly received.
And what we're going to do is just send cards out, thank you cards to all the volunteers, you know, put it in the newspaper, and because they're doing a good job, and we really thank them. From the bottom of my heart, we thank them.
And for the volunteers, it's that heartfelt thanks that makes getting their hands dirty all worthwhile. In Pajaro, Lorna Ho, KNTV News, Nightside.
In a land where he once stood with pride, but he'll find his way by the morning light.
The generous efforts of government agencies on both sides of the river, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the hundreds of volunteers who cared enough to help their neighbors have all had a visible effect. Both the town of Pajaro and the surrounding fields are coming back to life. Work continues on cleanup and rebuilding throughout the Pajaro Valley. Lives are beginning to return to normal, even though there are constant reminders of the flood and the damage it caused. Meantime, there are some precautions all of us can take to be ready for another flood. Most of these tips are the kind of common sense we should already follow in case of any disaster. Before the flood, keep a stock of food that requires little cooking and no refrigeration in case electric power is cut off. Keep a portable radio, flashlights, and plenty of batteries. Keep first aid supplies at hand. Make sure your vehicle is fueled. Know your elevation above flood stage and know your evacuation route. When a flood warning is issued, store drinking water in containers, even a clean bathtub in case water service is interrupted. Elevate the things in your home that could be damaged by floodwater, and move yourself to a place of safety before access is cut off by rising floodwaters. During the flood, avoid areas that are prone to rising water. Don't cross a flowing stream either on foot or in your vehicle. Don't drive over flooded roads. But if your vehicle stalls in high water, get out immediately and seek higher ground to keep from being swept downstream. Don't camp or park your vehicle near streams that may still be rising, and be especially cautious at night when it's harder to recognize flood dangers. After the flood, don't eat fresh food that has come in contact with floodwaters. Boil your drinking water and pump out wells until it's certain your water supply is safe. Seek any necessary medical care at the nearest hospital, or if you need food or clothing, contact a designated Red Cross shelter. If you have to come in contact with floodwater, make sure you've had a tetanus shot within the last year. Don't handle live electrical equipment in wet areas. Use flashlights, not lanterns or torches, in areas where flammables or natural gas might be present. And don't visit disaster areas. Your presence may hamper relief and rescue efforts. Many people were severely impacted by the flooding that hit the Pajaro Valley in March of 1995. But with that hardship came the realization of how many people cared enough to help. And that seems to be a constant whenever disaster strikes. I'm Tony Russomanno.